I'm sure the evidence has been overwhelming for some time that we could suffer a similar attack. It's been pointed out that the availability of semi-automatic weapons in this country is less great than it is in France. That's partly because of our good fortune in being an island. But notwithstanding that, I think that there's been a risk of such attacks taking place for a long time. That's been quite clear from what the Prime Minister said in Parliament, and I've never seen anything to suggest otherwise.
But do you think that's the only thing, perhaps, preventing an attack, is the availability of automatic weapons? I mean, there is the desire and the personnel. Is that what you're saying? They're already here?
The evidence which has been presented to Parliament, leave the Intelligence and Security Committee out of it, has made quite clear that there are a number of instances in which there have been plots to commit mass terrorism in this country. I mean, I think we've been living under this for a very long time. Arguably, it's been going on for years. I think we've been extraordinarily fortunate that our intelligence agencies have been able to prevent those. There have, of course, been incidents, and terrible incidents, like the murder of Fusilier drummer Lee Rigby. But those incidents, appalling though they are, have been of a rather limited character, certainly since the 7/7 attacks. So, yes, the risk is clearly there that it may happen again. Exactly what form it would take, I don't know. But I think that we are certainly fortunate in that the availability of semi-automatic weaponry, particularly amongst criminals in this country, appears to be less available than it is on the continent. But that's only one aspect of a way in which such an attack could take place.
So that threat overshadowing and informing the debate about British military involvement in Syria, is it your view that extending attacks, British attacks against Islamic State into Syria, would make this country safer?
My personal view is it's not a solution in itself. It can't be, and indeed the Prime Minister hasn't suggested that it's a solution in itself. And I can well understand why some of my colleagues, on whichever benches they may be on, are concerned about taking such a move. But we are currently taking military action in a limited way in Iraq against IS. There is effectively no border between northern Iraq and northern Syria. And there is, I think, an illogicality in restricting the ability of British forces to participate in striking at IS in northern Syria. By doing that, I have very little doubt that it may contribute to reducing IS's ability to conduct terrorism anywhere else in the world, whether it's terrorism against people locally or indeed in Tunisia, where, of course, we also suffered casualties, or indeed in the United Kingdom. So I think it's a legitimate thing for the Prime Minister to ask for. But it's not going to provide in itself a long-term solution to this problem, which is, of course, based around the ungoverned space that exists and, indeed, the massive political and social crisis which is tearing the Middle East apart and which one can see daily on our screens and in which the principal victims are Muslims.
And just let me key into your legal expertise on this. Of course, there has been a UN resolution. The previous argument about Britain not getting involved was that the Syrian government had not asked for it. That still is the case, but there's been a UN resolution. But there are those that say this is not a Chapter 7 from the United Nations mandating UN members to use all means necessary to get involved. Would there be enough legal cover?
If there were to be a Chapter 7 resolution, well, that would be clearly a very desirable outcome.
But what exists now, is that enough?
What exists now is clearly enough. I have to say that under Article 51 of the UN Charter, there's a right to self-defence individually and collectively. If northern Syria is being used as a base to attack Iraq, and for that matter, to foment terrorism in the United Kingdom, and there is no other reasonable means of trying to control it other than using military force, then the right to self-defence under Article 51 of the UN Charter must apply. I've never thought that there was a complex legal issues about what IS is doing in Syria and the right to take military action against IS. But the much more important question is there a strategy, and can it be part of the strategy? And the other thing I think we have to remember, and I think is sometimes forgotten in this debate, is if Parliament votes to approve the use of British military force in northern Syria, this isn't some green light to generalised military action. Every single act which takes place thereafter must be necessary and proportionate to some legitimate end, which must be preventing IS perpetrating terrorism. It doesn't give a blank cheque to the Prime Minister, or indeed anybody else, to carry out generalised military operations unless they have some specific and clear purpose which is legitimate.
Just last question about your own party, the investigation that's going on into the youth wing about over-enthusiastic, as the Defence Secretary has termed it, activities there, bullying, intimidation. I don't know if they campaigned in your constituency during the recent general election, but it's got to be sorted out, hasn't it?
I don't know it had anything to do with them. Of course, youth wings of parties are very important, but bullying within youth wings is completely unacceptable. And the stories that have come out are, I think, very concerning, and I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister's made clear that we're going to get to the bottom of it. Those who are young and want to get involved in politics have got to be provided with role models that show them what politics is about and how it can be conducted properly.